Hi everyone. I wanted to share this message with you about conflict in marriage because conflict is inevitable. You're two different people from two different backgrounds, two different upbringings, two different personalities, beliefs, values, ideas, and there you are, unifying together in one home, trying to raise a family together, trying to merge yourselves together as one when you have so many differences. Conflict is inevitable. Not to mention all of our past experiences that create different triggers for us and cause us to be reactive in different ways. Of course there's going to be conflict. And one critical factor in conflict in marriage is that there is also a spiritual component there. Because when there is a beautiful, godly marriage, the Yetzer Hara is there to undermine God's design for a beautiful, holy marriage. So the Yetzer Hara is trying to pull you apart, and he is trying to cause you to move away from each other instead of moving towards each other. So how do we deal with conflict in marriage? Here's how I like to understand it. Imagine you're sitting at a long dining room table. You are on one end of the table, your husband is on the other end of the table, and your problem is in the middle of the table. What usually happens is each one of you points at that problem in the middle of the table and says, that's your problem. No, that's your problem. No, that's your problem. No, that's your problem. That's what conflict is. Here's how it should look. There's a long dining room table. You and your husband both sit at the head of the table, and you put the problem at the other end of the table. And then you look at each other and you say, that down there, that's our problem. How are we going to deal with our problem? Conflict in marriage is about recognizing that we're a team. I understand something just happened. I understand maybe I was just triggered, or maybe you were just triggered. Something just happened that caused one of us to be reactive. And usually what happens in conflict is that, let's say you are reactive to something that your husband said or did that pushed your buttons. So then you're reactive to that, and then you push his buttons, and then he reacts to that, and that pushes your buttons. And this conflict escalates and goes round and round and round, and we enter into what I like to call the crazy cycle, okay? How do we stop that from happening? We need to recognize that whatever is going on, this is not about faulting, this is not about blaming, this is our problem. It's not about you, it's not about me. Let's look at that problem, look at each other and say, we're in this together. What are we going to do to solve that problem? Now, how do we stop that crazy cycle? How do we stop ourselves in the moment from reacting to that trigger? That would require us to start recognizing our symptoms. I feel myself starting to get triggered by something he said or did, or by something he didn't do or didn't say. So instead of becoming reactive to it, I need to stop and ask myself, why am I feeling triggered? You see, very often we try to escape our triggers. We don't like how we feel when we're experiencing those symptoms, and we get into fight or flight. So some of us turn to fight, and some of us turn to flight, and we just run away from the situation, which again perpetuates the conflict in either way, whether it's through fight or through flight. Our triggers are not something that should be causing us to be reactive, and they're not something that should be causing us to run away and be extremely uncomfortable. Your trigger is your teacher. When you start feeling those symptoms, when you start feeling yourself getting triggered by something, that's the moment to stop and say, okay, a minute, why am I feeling this way? Why am I reacting to his response? Why am I reacting to what he said in this way? Let me understand what's going on. Not only that, we can also stop and say, okay, he just reacted in a way because he was triggered. Why do I think he was triggered? What I just said obviously pushed his buttons. I wonder what is going on inside of him. Let me get curious. Let me get curious about my responses, my reactions. Let me be curious about his reactions, and let's discuss them. Let's talk about why we each responded in the way that we did, instead of allowing ourselves to enter into the crazy cycle. And by doing that, we're able to put the problem on the other side of the table, sit together with our husbands and say, this is our problem. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's understand how we could react differently to each other so that we don't push each other's buttons. Let's understand where it's coming from. Let's not take it personally. And just because he says something, that doesn't mean that he doesn't love me, and it doesn't mean that he doesn't care about me or prioritize me. And just because I said something in a way that I said, it doesn't mean I don't respect you. It doesn't mean I don't love you. Let's understand why we are reacting in the way that we are through healthy communication. And then everything that happens, we will look at it as a team, as if this is our issue, this is our problem. Let's deal with it together. So you see, during conflict, the Yetzer Hara is working overtime to try to pull you away from each other. But understanding this perspective, that the problem is not yours, the problem isn't mine, the problem is ours, that's how we're able to stand up and say, no. We are not going to use this conflict to pull us away from each other. We're going to use this conflict to pull us towards each other. And we're going to sit there together, and we're going to recognize that that problem is our problem. How can we solve it together? Now, another very important factor, and I can't express enough how critical this is that sometimes we become very reactive when we are running on empty, when we're not filled up enough, when we're overwhelmed, when we haven't taken care of ourselves, when we haven't prioritized our own needs. So please make sure that you are taking care of yourself. You're getting enough sleep, you're drinking enough water, you're eating healthy, you're getting some movement in your day, you are meeting with friends, talking to friends, you're taking care of yourself in all 4 dimensions: physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. Sometimes we're afraid of our needs. We feel like they make us seem weak or imperfect in some way. We have like what I like to call the Eshes Chayil syndrome, where we have to be this perfect wife and this perfect mother, and we kind of live as martyrs. Right? I always say, like, don't turn Mother's Day into Martyr's Day, right? But we tend to live in that space sometimes. And what we need to understand, needs are legitimate. We say a bracha every single day, thank you Hashem for our needs. Yes, we do. The bracha of Sha'asa li kol tzarki. We usually translate this as we thank Hashem for providing us with all our needs, for taking care of all of our needs, but it means something else also. She'asa li kol tzarki. We thank Hashem for creating me with my needs. Please don't minimize your needs. They are critical, they are important, they are valid, they are legitimate. Take care of yourself. So when you are able to recognize your own needs and express your needs, and when you're able to recognize your husband's needs and create the space for him to express his needs. Remember, a long time ago, I put out a video explaining how to create the deepest levels of emotional intimacy, and I spoke about being a transmitter and being a receiver. You have to be able to be a transmitter and understand how you feel and express how you feel and express those needs to your husband, and then you have to be a receiver and give him the space to express his needs to you. And by doing that, we're able to understand why this conflict is happening. Why did I react the way I did? Why did he react the way he did? And when we fill ourselves up from within, then we have a much easier time managing the conflict and eventually preventing conflict from happening altogether. Thank you so much for being here with me today and for learning together with me. I'll see you next week, Be'ezus Hashem.